We are privileged to have an exceptional panel of speakers with us today. They are Carol Christine Fair, Carolina Chimoy, Imtiaz Gul, Naveen Murshid, Christoph Zalewski. The session will be moderated by Gregory Simons. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guests to the stage. Thank you.
A pen?
I have one, thank you.
No. Say again? No.
So you from India or from
Bangladesh.
From Bangladesh? Okay.
How is your headache? How is your headache? It's coming down. Super fluffy. That's good, of course. Do you want some coffee? That's actually pretty good.
is on.
1, 2, 3.
Okay,
Coffee.
so we will begin this plenary session, Wars Without Ends, How Conflicts Outlive Ceasefires. So hopefully I can try and shake you out of any kind of food coma by attempting to play my traditional devil's advocate role and to keep a relatively interactive play in this session. So what we will do to begin with, we've got 5 excellent speakers with diverse backgrounds and knowledge, etc., who will give different perspectives. So we're going to go through a couple of rounds. The first round, which every speaker will have 4 to 5 minutes to address a provocative question which I pose. And once that is over, that we will go into an interactive discussion based on the previous round, and then we'll throw it open to Q&A. So, okay, when we're talking about wars without ends, of course, wars are conceived as having an end, but if we look in the last years, we have things like endless wars and global war on terrorism, these kinds of things. Now we've shifted from those kind of conflicts to others which are more state-centric. And we've got Ukraine, we've got Gaza, we've got different conflicts appearing in different places. And we have, in the middle of this notion of an evolving geopolitical order. And I mean, if we look at how these are conceived historically, you have these ideas that when there is a hegemon, there is peace. And if we look at these in the past, we have the representations like Pax Romana, Pax Britannica, and now perhaps the final hurrah of Pax Americana. And one of the things that needs to be asked when we're talking about peace, whose peace exactly? Because while the imperial centre may have some notion of peace and stability, there are others that have to pay the price for that peace and stability. And when we also look at this, and this is something which we hopefully can bring out in this session, that you have a physical, a kinetic war, but alongside it you have a non-kinetic information war. Because wars, if we look at it, battles are won on the field militarily, but wars themselves, that is a collection of battles, are eventually won politically. So, and if we're looking at that, we can see a number of things happening now. For example, how Ukraine conflict is seen in Europe or in the global north as opposed to the global south, and vice versa, how the global south sees things like the Gaza genocide, or how the global north represents and interprets that same thing. So we get different perspectives of the same thing, which are driven by interests and ambitions. So that is enough from me. So I will ask a question to a named speaker, and they will have 4 to 5 minutes to address that, and we'll go to the next speaker so we can move this around and get a good dynamic going. So I would like to ask Christine. Now, I mean, you have interesting times in the United States at the moment, and if we look at it, I mean, one can see that in terms of geostrategic imperatives, these remain the same. The ways of achieving them have changed, but you have a president who is interesting, if we're to put it diplomatically. And on the one hand, he tries to present himself as a peace president, and this is something he tried to pursue in his election. I will end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Yet, and I mean, he even, campaigned for the Nobel Peace Prize. And on the other hand, he is creating wars, like enabling and complicit in the genocide in Gaza, but also threatening other countries like Venezuela, like Nigeria. So what can we make of this? I mean, in terms of, what do you predict? How will this end in terms of the theme of this panel? Is this going to be an intensification of conflict in the physical world, or is this going to be something which is going to perhaps be an information war?
So I'm a South Asianist, so that means my work focuses on Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So I'm going to confine my answer to the regions of the world that I actually know the most about, not the other conflicts that you mentioned. What I actually think is interesting is that there have been some conflicts that have decisively ended. The Tamil insurgency in Sri Lanka decisively ended. The Khalistan insurgency in India decisively ended. But there are a lot of other conflicts in South Asia that are ongoing. So, for example, the Maoist insurgency in India, though it is today waning, it has a history of coming back. India's northeast insurgencies, they wax and they wane. The ongoing insurgency, Pakistan-backed in Kashmir, that's ongoing, in Pakistan's own war against the Pakistani Taliban. So I think while you're right that some of these conflicts don't seem to have an end, there are precedents in this region of conflicts actually ending. I'm not sure that that's the answer you're looking for, but it's the answer that I can give you based upon my bases of expertise.
Okay, thank you. So, Carolina, so you've been going to Ukraine and covering the conflict there for some time now. And you can perhaps see that there is quite a substantial difference in how people from the global south perceive and interpret the war in Ukraine, as opposed to the global north, which sees it in a completely different fashion. But at the same time, that's one level of issue. But when you look at another one, there is the issue how Western mainstream media have covered the war in Ukraine, because this has not remained constant, but has kind of evolved with geopolitical circumstances. So if we look at it, in the beginning, you had these predictions that Russia would lose the war, that Russia would be broken up, and that it would be Ukraine that is victorious. But now we're at a time when that has evolved into something else. I mean, could you go a little bit into, from your perspective, insider, how these different editorial lines evolve and change with politics and circumstances, please?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, it's important to say that the war started in 2014. The full-scale invasion is what happened in 2022, and back then in 2014, you are right, it was covered until a certain point. Then there were the Minsk agreements, and everything was fine. Life continued. Many countries needed to keep in touch with Russia due to energy and their economies. And then 2022, the full-scale invasion started, and it became a huge test for the West. That's how Europe sold it. That's how the United States also talked about it, a huge test for democracies, meaning Ukraine is fighting not only for their own political system and what they believe in, their rights, but also for all our rights and our political systems. And that's when this war became global, and that is also when the difference stood up between the global south, how they see this war. Most of the countries say it's not our war. We don't have to get involved in a war that it's not ours. Then the double standards come in. And you are right, in a certain sense also the media and the editorial line went with that. I think also social media plays a big factor in this. Because nowadays, I mean, if you compare it to 2014 when the war started and to 2022, nowadays everyone has a phone, everyone was showing the pictures from 2022 when the Russians got not only into the Donbas region, but even intended to go into Kiev, and everyone was posting the pictures of the attacks. That's something that it's still happening now, when you see civilians posting pictures of drones that fall into schools or hospitals, meaning they're targeting civilians as well. That has a completely different impact than what we were seeing, the pictures we were seeing in 2014. So yeah, I think that is pretty much my perspective on the war since 2014.
Thank you. So, some different perspectives as we see on an environment which is constantly evolving in terms of realities, which is multiple, but also the politics of those particular things. So if we, Imtiaz, now you're from Pakistan,
Yep.
and it's not been so boring there recently with the increased tensions, border tensions with India, and you have Donald Trump, who's claiming that he brought peace to the conflict earlier in the year. I mean, as Pakistan is in the middle of this hotspot, I mean, you've got India, China, Iran, the United States, you've got all of these rather large powers. How does Pakistan intend to navigate those particular pitfalls, especially you've not only got external conflicts on your border, you've got internal conflicts within your borders. So how are these to be somehow navigated? What is your prediction for the future? Because if we look at some of these conflicts, especially the external ones, they come at very, should we say, specific geopolitical moments. And so far, there's probably no accident or coincidence in the nature and the timing that these things break out. So how does Pakistan assert its interests and its sovereignty, its integrity in this hotspot?
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much first to CGS for organizing such a grand event and allowing people to discuss the evolving global order into disorder. And then I think it couldn't have been there couldn't have been a better occasion for us from Pakistan to discuss and share with the audiences abroad as to what does it mean to be caught between various conflicting interests. So we are surrounded by India. On the other hand, to the west, is Afghanistan still in turmoil. Then Iran, which is under global Western sanctions. And then, of course, with China, which the best friend in the world, I would say. We call it, although it's a very old cliche, but it's called higher than Himalayas and deeper than the oceans friendship. It has evolved into a much more than what we call the friendship, because you can have friends, but then lasting partnerships, I think, are very difficult to forge, and this is what Pakistan and China have managed. And as for navigating this difficult situation that you're dealing with a president in Washington who is taking up the advice by his security establishment extremely seriously when they say that China is an ascendant threat, ascendant challenge to the interests of the United States. And then you have a very close partner of the United States, part of the Quad, that is India, which itself is also sees itself as a competition to China. So now to deal with that situation, I think is extremely difficult when we saw how this dislike of China or pro-China sentiment also translated into removal of the government in Pakistan back in April 2022. And I think Epstein files have also made it very clear very recently that a few emails that that were quoted by a drop site, they also said that the arrival of Imran Khan or the victory of Imran Khan in June 2018 was not welcomed by many in the United States, by people like Jeffrey Epstein himself, who considered him as an anti-peace, as a very dangerous man, as somebody who may be pandering to the Islamist radicals. So we have seen, how this external influence has played out on Pakistan, and for long, Pakistan, as long as Imran Khan was the president, the prime minister, was dealing with Washington, which was indifferent. President Biden's administration, I think, basically didn't deal at all with Prime Minister Imran Khan's administration. But the moment he was removed and we started this brush with the so-called hybrid regime, I think that things went better. And then probably it was a God-sent opportunity for Pakistan when the Indians lobbed missiles into Pakistan on the so-called terrorist camps, and then the Indians got the reply. So this impressed, I think, the world altogether. And I've been hearing this. I've been traveling to Europe, to America, to China. So almost everybody knew what happened in the 4 days of brief conflict between May 7 and May 10, and how even President Trump then kept repeating that how many, like 5 to 7 aircraft down by the Pakistani Air Force. So Indians, had nowhere to go. And this was where I think Pakistan basically was able to regain the place it had lost in White House, in Washington. And I think ever since Pakistan, regardless of the merits or demerits of the policy that Pakistan has adopted, but I was reading the Bloomberg news yesterday, and it also says that the Operation Sindoor by India in May 2007, basically in May this year, allowed Pakistan to resurface on the global map and brought it at par with India. And this is what Pakistan had been missing. And I think this was one wonderful opportunity for Pakistan to navigate this complex environment. And I think right now, we have never seen such a bonhomie between Washington and Islamabad, just because the president in Washington thinks very well of the field marshal of Pakistani forces as well as of the government there. I'm not going into the details as to whether that's good or bad, but as far Pakistan as a country is concerned, I think it has regained a lot of space it had lost to Washington, to pro-India lobbies within the United States. And I think largely, if you look at it from distance, it has been a successful journey ever since Donald Trump returned to the White House.
Thank you. So, if we're looking at geopolitics, it's not only an academic discipline, it's also a pragmatic practice, which is quite often overlooked. So not only is it a means to interpret events, trends, and processes in the international arena, it is also that means with which to formulate policy. And something which is quite often overlooked is that even though the formulation of the policy is towards managing and regulating the flows and relations of power and influence, of course, this needs to be somehow justified and legitimized. And this, you got different speech acts, different historical uses of historical memory and mythology to justify what is happening. So, Christoph, so when we're looking at Poland, as you earlier mentioned today, is the shortest route between Berlin and Moscow, which is not a very enviable geographic position to be in. But there is also a very complicated, not only contemporary issue, but historical one, because if we go back long enough, of course, beginning of the 17th century, it was Poland at Moscow's gates when Poland was an empire. And so there is this, one hand, this historical but also contemporary historical antagonism from this point onwards with Russia, but you have that tricky one with Germany, and also this complicated relationship with Ukraine, which on the one hand politically support, especially if we look at the geopolitical equation, that to support Ukraine is to cause problems for Russia. But also, by supporting Ukraine, there are issues such as the Volyn massacre for some. So when you have this very, should we say, varied and at what looks contradictory kind of sets of historical facts, historical memory, and contemporary events, how does Poland navigate this politically on the domestic level and on the foreign level?
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's very relevant. I'm here in independent Bangladesh. I'm from independent Poland. And both of our countries are united by this kind of feeling that independence is something important. And as we speak, Ukraine is fighting for its independence. Actually, it's the Ukrainian War of Independence. And it's something which basically is the first thing when we think about Ukraine today. And we do not see the Ukrainian conflict or the Russian aggression on Ukraine as a kind of regional conflict. But it's something which should be at the heart of many states who would like to remain independent. Because I would understand that this war is one of the first imperial wars of the 21st century. Many things have been said about this kind of, polar order. But historically, when we look at the history of mankind, this kind of setting, it was the setting when different empires had different poles of power, and I don't think it's beneficial for many independent states in Europe and beyond. And answering your question, and I think that that's a crucial thing. If we have 7 neighbors, Poland, Czech Republic, Lithuania, Germany, Slovakia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. And I think that was a success, the beginning success of our story, of our 35 years of continued development and growth, was because we were able to mend our relationship with many neighbors, with Germany, with the Czech Republic, with Lithuania, with Ukraine. And that was the kind of process of reconciliation is a very important foundation for peace. Not only between states, because that's my argument. We don't need to have only this peace between states, but we need to have peace between societies. And you need to have the reconciliation after the conflict, and you need to have the institutions of reconciliation. In our Polish-German example, it's, for example, the youth exchange program. Like every year, more than 200,000 people from Poland and Germany would work together, or study together. You have bilateral institutions, and I think it's crucial to maintaining peace and maintaining cooperation. But before we have this kind of reconciliation, we need to have just peace. And that's, by just peace, I understand the situation when both parties in the conflict can, after the conflict, remain sovereign states and can be take decisions on their own. If the premises of the peace are wrong, you will not have a lasting peace, even if you call this kind of solution a peace plan or something like this. So we need to have just peace as a precondition for this development and reconciliation. But we also need the third thing, and I would wrap up with this. We need to have, most unfortunately, credible deterrence as independent states, and also in Europe. And that's something we need to invest in. And that's I think that's something which, in the Global South, you basically were so kind to mention this states. And if we invest our money and our resources in deterrence and in defense, we don't have so much resources to invest, for example, in developmental cooperation, humanitarian need, and other very important, let's say, global commons. So I think we need to understand that the very basic of what the state needs to provide to its citizens is the security. And because of the aggression in Eastern Europe, we don't feel secure anymore in Europe. So we need to invest more in our defense and in our deterrence. And I think that's something we would like to cooperate more. We would like to invest more in our relationship with the countries of Global South. But for the foreseeable future, we will need to invest more in our defense in the expense of other projects. And I think that's the thing, the very sad thing about the war you mentioned. It's not only local conflict, but it's local, but it has global implications for everybody as we sit here.
Okay, so just hold on to that one for the next round.
Okay, not easy, but
Keep it. So now we have the issue that if we look at how wars are communicated globally, it seems that if we look at the global north, how it communicates wars, that you have all wars, and to use the Animal Farm expression, all wars are equal, but some are more equal than others. So if we look at Ukraine, this is a war that is more equal than others for the global north. But if we're looking at the global south, you have other conflicts, and especially if we're looking at the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is a big thing which is, for the most part, ignored or downplayed in the mainstream media of the global north. And you have different geopolitical, political, all kinds of different reasons for this. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of the global south, they see Ukraine. This is a war, it's a European war. It's about realism, hard power, who's the top dog. But when they see Gaza, where you have an absolutely unequal use of force and military power from a state actor, which is directed against civilians as a collective punishment, there is no, for example, condemnation. You even have an International Court of Justice. This is a plausible genocide. But Netanyahu can visit the US Houses of Parliament and he gets a standing ovation. And this creates some dissonance when you get outside of this bubble, where this is also seen as a European war against the Muslim world, against the Arab world. And I'd like to ask Naveen the question, I mean, you have these unequal perceptions of war. I mean, if you're looking at these wars from the global south perspective, I mean, how does the, how would you say, the representation of the Ukraine conflict versus how they represent the Gaza conflict, what things create this cognitive dissonance and which things resonate and do not resonate with the daily lives of people in the global south who see one war as being more militarily equal and another one which is absolutely unequal in terms of military power. Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right that from the global south, this inequality is very palpable, that this is exactly, I think you've correctly identified the contradictions, the perceptions, and how there is this sense of global outrage in the case of Ukraine, but not in the case of Gaza. And I think in terms of thinking about why there is this discrepancy, because there are two things. One, the perception problem. The other is, why is there this kind of discrepancy in the first place? What is it that certain actors are able to do? And why is it that the West is sometimes complicit in genocide and it pretends to not see others, whereas in some instances, they speak in a righteous fashion. And I think Ukraine is that war where they want to take the righteous position, right? To say that they're on the side of peace, on the side of stability, and so on. But I think, this conversation that we are having in part offers an explanation, which is how, even in our conversations surrounding peace, we talk about defense, we talk about arming ourselves even more in order to secure ourselves, right? That it creates the security dilemma that it probably would is something that we know theoretically, we know that empirically, we know that in trying to be more safe, we actually make ourselves significantly more unsafe. We know this, and yet we arm ourselves up to our teeth, right? So there's that kind of a structural feature. There are other structural elements here too, that we've moved away from a world when we were thinking more about wars in terms of great power wars, right? And right now, that's not the world we are in. Greg, you spoke of hegemonic stability, right? But what we see now is that those who are in a position of more power, the superpowers of the world, are the biggest perpetrators of human rights violations around the world too. They are the ones who are complicit in genocide. They are the ones who arm genocide. And in thinking about the sort of global security threat that they create, it effectively counters any idea that hegemonic stability would have about a world where hegemons actually do create peace and stability. Because what we have seen is United States that actually creates death and destruction all over the world. It hasn't really done much else in terms of peace and security. The reason why everyone wants to be on the side of the United States is so that they can save themselves a bout of death and destruction, right? And so maintaining good relations with the United States, despite its behavior as an aggressive entity, is something that becomes beneficial. I mean, if any other country behaved in the way that the United States did, I don't think there would be this kind of silence, right? Or this kind of pandering to it that we feel, especially in thinking about the global south, countries in the global south, that there is a sense that you still need to be in good relations with the United States, speaks to the fear factor that's involved in maintaining this, because otherwise we don't really know what might happen. You know, we've heard about how the U.S. In Pakistan contributed to regime change. There are a lot of people who think that a similar thing has happened here in Bangladesh also. We have seen the United States play this role in Latin America, all over the world actually, right? And that is what people point to when you bring this up in terms of the US being some kind of an arbiter of peace and security in the greater world. And I think what does connect all of these interests is the fact that now, if we are sort of thinking about international politics structurally, we are no longer in a world of just thinking about great powers, but we're having to contend with global capitalism. And with supply chain economics and politics, we are in a significantly more integrated world, which means we do have a certain kind of reliance. In the 60s and 70s, we used to talk about dependent development. Right now, a lot of people say that, oh, no, that doesn't really happen that way because, you know, we have all these segmented markets now. Markets are able to operate independently, and yet development actually is quite dependent on markets abroad. The US forms a massive market for many countries in the global south, which again creates another impetus for maintaining good relations. And it's in this context that I think, you know, the conversation we're having here about China as an emerging power becomes really useful, because I think this is the time, in the context of you know, the tariffs that President Trump has put forward, and the way in which it fashions China as an emerging threat. There are all kinds of ways in which countries are thinking about how to bypass the United States in terms of the economic relationship that they have. Will there be other ways in which markets can be developed outside of the United States? Is there a world where the United States isn't as relevant as it is? And, you know, we realize that in trying to think through these, or, you know, when the United States sort of thinks about how to manage China, when it creates alliances on the basis of managing China, for example, Quad and so on, you know, that also introduces another level of aggression in the world system, that it creates a kind of conflictual vibe into the international system, which again makes for a fairly more insecure world, right? So the current situation, I would say, is one where we have discontent as something that's durable, as something that's persistent, and made complicated by the military-industrial complex, made complicated by how security and economic interests align together, and how in all of this, there has been, you know, easy complicity in democratic backsliding, that we've seen democracy under threat all across the world. And because we are contending with such spectacular violence in this present moment that we've been willing to look the other way when that happens. So again, coming back to how this all informs countries in the global south, I think all of this is information for those who are trying to think about world politics today, knowing right now, because right now there's, the United States doesn't even hide anymore how racist their policies and politics are, right? Now that they don't hide it, now countries in the global south don't have to really beat around the bush anymore either. They are now quite openly thinking about how to imagine a different world where peace might have some chance. Like you were talking about just peace. We need to sort of think about things like not just peace, but also about justice and about just justice and restorative justice and what that might look like. And I think in this moment, these are the this is the impetus coming from the global south.
Okay, thank you. So we will just move into a quick round, 1 to 2 minutes maximum, so we can get a short bit of Q&A from the audience, but 1 to 2 minutes from each speaker, the reflections on this. And I know Carolina was already ready earlier, so please, Carolina.
Thanks. Well, I think everything is interconnected, what has been said here. You talking about global versus local, I think that's something that we can see on a micro level. We all see what's happening in different countries, Western countries also around the world, voters going more for the extreme parties, for the populists. And one of the reasons for that is because a lot of people feel left behind after and during globalization. And what we are seeing on a national level, like in this far-right or far-left parties, we are also seeing this on a macro level, seeing the global south also protesting in their own way against the West by, for example, not supporting a war in Ukraine or not seeing it as the same party. And in this shifting moment we're in, it's very difficult to think in the same patterns we're used to think about peace, about a peace agreement, about societies coming together. I think this is something that we have to rethink in a new creative way, because obviously the old way of looking at wars and looking at peace agreements, it hasn't worked. And it will not if we don't start thinking about that in a different way.
Thank you. Anyone want to jump in with their reflections? 1 to 2 minutes?
Do you want to? No? Yeah, I concur with other panelists. The Western love for democracy, for human rights, I think got exposed, particularly what happened in Gaza, the genocide of the Palestinians. So thereafter, I think all the sheen that there was on this human rights advocacy for democracy, the rule of law, I think that is gone. Everybody now, all those who abetted Israel, who supported directly or indirectly, they stand naked. And this has brought about a new dynamic, injected a new dynamic in global politics. And you are right when you say that now the global south, or the countries in the global south, don't really have to bother about all this kind of reprieve that they have been getting from the West. We saw, how all of a sudden the Western media went quiet over the so-called persecution that had been going on in the Chinese Western Xinjiang province. Before the Palestinians Israelis started killing the Palestinians, there was almost every day in one of the mainstream medias these reports about persecution in Xinjiang. But post-October 2023, we hardly found any reports. Just because the West lost this locus standi in this entire discourse. They lost the credentials for democracy. So I think this is, in a way, the Israelis did the world something good. It brought an end to the exceptionalism that the US and other Western countries had been deploying when dealing with countries like Pakistan, like Bangladesh. As I think you were saying, I'll conclude with that had another country in the global south indulged in the kind of genocide that Palestinians endured, the hell would have broken loose in the West. But there was a single word. Of course, there were a lot of demonstrations, protests within the West, and the Spaniards, I think, took the lead, people in Portugal, in Spain, many other countries. But as a whole, the governments worked in unison, the major lead governments, and that way I think it's a good opportunity for the countries of the global south to chart a different path for themselves. Thank you.
If I may?
Christine, please.
Yeah. So first of all, I really want to thank you for continuing to say genocide in Gaza. It's not clear that everyone else would. So thank you. As an American, who I've been very critical of Israel going back to my early adulthood, I have seen, as a consequence of Israel's genocide in Gaza, enormous sea shift in American public opinion about Israel. Something that I never thought was going to be possible. I'm actually seeing it. That you would have a candidate like Mamdani that would run openly critical of Israel, I think has opened up a new space for politics for those Democrats that are paying attention and want to learn. This is a sea shift. Now, unfortunately, because of the enormous influence of AIPAC on our political system, I don't think that American public opinion is going to changes in American public opinion is going to change in American public policy. But I agree with everything that's been said. When Israel does it, there's no criticism. But when Russia does it, all hell breaks loose. And the complete exposure of not only of American hypocrisy, I mean, the Germans have been horrible. The Britons have arrested people, elderly people who are protesting for Palestinian rights. It has just really shown the complete impoverishment of the West when it comes to Israel. But I also will say, as an educator, for much of this panel has been out of my wheelhouse, this is a terrible time to be an educator. One of the most terrifying things in the classroom, my views on Palestine are well known, is if a student accuses me of being an anti-Semite. It has had an unbearably chilling effect on the classroom, on the discussions that you can have, the honesty with which you can have conversations. I was recently teaching the genocide of Bangladeshis in my class, and I threw up a series of definitions of genocide that different organizations offer. And even as I was saying it, my worst fear was that someone was going to accuse me of shadow teaching on Israel. So I really just want to thank everyone for dilating upon this issue. I think it's really critical. There's no solution. Israel's going to get away with what it's doing. In 10 years, there might not be a Palestinian question to even debate. But I do want to thank everyone for dilating upon it. Thank you.
Yeah. May I just jump in, because I think it's very relevant points have been touched upon. But I think, the danger of playing Gaza war against the Ukraine war is that we just would play one strategy against another. And that I don't think that's the way forward, to be honest. I think, in the contemporary world, we have three points of gravity. We have Eastern Europe with Ukraine, we have Middle East, and we have Taiwan. And I think it's crucial that we do everything possible that all three centers of gravity would remain peaceful. And I think that's our responsibility. And as you know, from my perspective on Gaza, of course it was a very brutal action, but we need to also remember what was the start of this war.
The occupation is the start of the war.
It was the terrorist attack, yeah?
No, the occupation is the start of the war.
It does not justify, let me finish. It was not this attack has not, this genocide, as you say is, we should also understand that, that Israel has the right to existence. And we, for example, practically every country in the European Union support both state solutions, that we need to create a safe space for Palestinians, but also we need to ensure that Israel has the right to exist there as it existed for 80 years.
Well, you do know that that's become dog whispering vocabulary, right? The vocabulary that says that Israel has the right to exist is really the justification of genocide. I'm sure at this point you know that.
No, it's not the justification for genocide.
It is being used, I think, largely.
I mean, you have to
justify
read the
what the Israelis have done.
But it's one of the interpretations. I think that's the.
And this is why we need democracy.
Let us look how the peace or the ceasefire came to existence. Yeah, when the Western countries and also the leading countries of the Muslim world came together in Egypt. We need to work together to achieve at least a ceasefire. The ceasefire would not have been possible.
Cost? At the
ceasefire
cost of
has meant
statehood?
you seize, we fire. That's what it has meant.
I will just round it up here a little bit. I think what this displays is the problem of representation and perception, because, I mean, you're seeing things from different angles, you got your different things. I would add, I mean, of course, anti-Semitism is meant to kill any kind of criticism. And I think that it ignores the fact by causing a genocide against Palestinians is the ultimate expression of anti-Semitism, as Palestinians are Semites. So after this, do we have time for one or two questions from the organisers? If you go to the speaker, please identify who you are, where you're from, and concise question.
Thank you so much. My name is Mohammed Shafiullah. I'm a former ambassador and associated with the Center for Governing Studies. You have been discussing war never ends and the ceasefire is just an occasion to rearm again. The question is how you end war, because 5 security members of the United Nations, there be arms manufacturer, supplier, and they are the merchant of death. So when the power like that are selling weapons and arms in the world, how you expect the war will end? It's a both $7 trillion business in the world, the war manufacturer. So they manufacture war, they stop in one side and then begin in another side because they have that industry have to run. So it is academic discussion. Thank you so much. It will continue so long you can impose armed disarmament. If it is possible to have armed disarmament, what was discussed many years in the United Nations, they could not do it because the 5-member Security Council, they don't want it. They want to continue with the war, and they create war because they are the manufacturer of the human death. They are the death merchant, I should say. Thank you so much.
So could the next please go to the microphone? Who are you? And so at the back first.
Thank you. My name is Tanvir. I teach international relations at Dhaka University. So I'll have two very brief academic questions to the panel. One is specifically to Professor Christine Fair and another to the entire panel. The first question is, if perpetual wars or the protracted wars that we see fail to come to any negotiated long-term solutions, and victor's peace remain the only option for belligerents to begin with, do you foresee future conflicts to be much larger in terms of scale and intensity of violence, because belligerents would ultimately see decisive and complete victory over their opponents as the only way to any lasting solutions? So that is to Professor Christine Fair. Second question is to the entire panel, and whoever wants to join in is fine. So for any protracted conflict to last, you also need protected narratives that are diametrically opposed to each other. In today's world, with almost no reference object for objectivity and a market push for disinformation, how do you end up tackling those narratives? Thank you.
So,
Yeah, so I'm going to focus on the India-Pakistan conflict because that's the most obvious one about which I think you're referring. The fundamental problem is that India cannot impose its will upon Pakistan. It can't impose a decisive defeat upon Pakistan. And Pakistan, for its part, is sassy enough to keep mounting challenges to India. So I don't see longer wars. What I see is there's never going to be a resolution of the Kashmir issue. For one reason is the Pakistani military itself is a big spoiler. If there were to be peace with India, it would be much more difficult for the Pakistan army to run the country in the way in which it does. So whenever there have been marches towards that, and I would say even with Musharraf's effort in 2004, the fact is the Corps commanders weren't behind him. So nuclear weapons are also a really important player here because they ensure that these conflicts actually don't last longer than a few weeks. We saw this during Kargil, we saw this in Operation Sindoor. Things escalated very, very quickly. Both sides are looking for an off-ramp. So I actually don't see these kinds of wars. What I actually see are these very highly tense crisis slides. But because of the presence of nuclear weapons, things escalate very quickly, but then both sides are very rapidly looking for an off-ramp going through bilateral channels, but also through multilateral channels.
and who wants to address the second question briefly?
What was that?
I don't remember.
I can go. I think I'll steal from the ambassador's words and reinforce disarmament, right? Because I think you're absolutely right. In this age, you cannot fight disinformation so easily. We live in a polarized world. What's problematic in this polarized world is that your views now come with guns and weapons and arms. And so it's whoever has more money, whoever has more arms, they win these battles, right? Disarmament will make the world a safer, more peaceful place.
And so for the very last question, thank you for patiently waiting. Please.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anjum Shahriar, master's student at Department of Government and Politics of Jahangirnagar University. My question is to Mr. Imtiaz Gul. Recently, we have seen Pakistan promoting Mr. Asim Munir to Field Marshal, the post of Field Marshal, which is, I think, the right next after Ayub Khan. And they have also created a new constitutional post, Chief of Defense, where he is given lifetime immunity. So when a nation is creating such extraordinarily powerful military post, and basically it can be seen that they are prioritizing military authority over the civilian governments. So with that structure, can a nation like that move towards peace, as we were discussing peace and wars? And another question to Ms. Christina. As we are discussing the Israel and Palestinian conflict, and I think one of the interesting perspectives that I have seen in the public support of after the Gaza genocide, I think the increasing public support for Gaza in American society, and what is interesting to see that even from the Republican side, we are seeing that very influential figures like Tucker Carlson and others supporting the Palestinian cause. So with this change in shift in public support, do you think any policy change we can see in the recent future? Thank you.
Okay, so may I? Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Yes, I think we have seen in recent weeks a further empowerment of Pakistan's military security apparatus. You can call it backsliding on democratic rights or internal empowerment of the armed forces. But whether peace depends on that, that is questionable, because in the world there are examples when there have been generals in power, but they brought about peace. I think the primary prerequisite for peace is, number one, trust between the two parties. And then what Christine also said, the Kashmir conflict. As for India, Pakistan is concerned, I think unless the Kashmir dispute is set to rest, unless it is addressed in a comprehensive, permanent way, the chances of peace, permanent peace, will remain grim. And since this was about the ceasefires and conflict, what is the correlationship? Similarly, our relationship with Afghanistan is also far away from peace because of this border issue. There are certain lobbies within Afghanistan which continue peddling the issue of border, calling it as an unfinished agenda. But they forget that, this geographical boundary that Pakistan is basically came into existence and also got international recognition the moment Pakistan was admitted to the United Nations. That is what creates a friction, triggers, this discussion on the Durand line. They call it the Durand line, we call it internationally recognized border. And the same issue, the same is the case with India. Unless we find a permanent solution to the line of control that divides the Kashmirs under the respective controls, it will be very difficult to think of peace. And in the end, it will depend on the intent as well as to how long does India want to stay in this state of perennial conflict with Pakistan, because Pakistan being an ally of China. So this is a very complicated situation. However, prerequisite is the resolution of Kashmir conflict this way or that way. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've abused sufficiently the time limit to a severe enough degree. So I would like to for you to join me in thanking this panel for a very lively discussion, debate on this very crucial issue. So thank you.
I think we need to go.
Thank you very much. I'm requesting all the speakers to come forward for a group session, group photo session.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we move forward, it is now my pleasure to invite His Excellency, the Ambassador of Nepal to People's Republic of Bangladesh, Mr. Ghanshyam Bhandari, to the stage. Bangladesh and Nepal share a long tradition of friendship, regional cooperation, and growing economic ties, and we are honored to have His Excellency with us today. We look forward to hearing his remarks. Sir, I'm kindly requesting you to come to the stage, please.
Thank you so much. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I commend the Center for Governance Studies for convening this Bay of Bengal Conversation 2025 and inviting me to speak a few words. I thank the CGS President, Mr. Jilhul Rehman, and the entire team for this opportunity. As this session is about reflections, I'll share my thoughts on Nepal-Bangladesh relations, which I proudly strive to promote, and highlighting the moments and milestones of which makes me happy. Albert Einstein once said, if you cannot explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Given the vast and ever-evolving scope of Nepal-Bangladesh relations and the fact that most of the ambassadors struggle to simplify their ideas at times, I may not be able to do justice to the topic at hand just in 10 minutes. But just as every storyteller has their own perspectives, I will share a few vignettes, even if they cannot capture the entire tale. Since I'm speaking after that insightful session on wars, conflicts, and ceasefires, I sincerely hope I'll not put you to sleep. Ladies and gentlemen, with a history of never having been under any foreign rule, Nepal has always upheld an independent and non-aligned foreign policy. Balance, neutrality, and good neighborliness have remained at the core of our foreign policy outlook. Not least in this light, Bangladesh continues to occupy an important place in Nepal's diplomatic engagements across bilateral, sub-regional, regional, and multilateral spheres. Our two countries share a friendship rooted in respect, mutual trust, and cooperation. Our relationship is also about a similar journey. We are co-authors of a story of development efforts and adventures that are sometimes humble, sometimes bold, but always in sync. Since the establishment of our diplomatic relations in 1972, our relationship has evolved across various sectors. We have always stood by one another in times of need, be it during Bangladesh's liberation war, Nepal's devastating earthquakes in 2015, or the recent COVID-19 pandemic. We continue to work together by drawing strength from transformative power of this goodwill and solidarity. Secondly, on economic partnership, while our trade and investment linkages remain modest, we have made some advances in recent years. Negotiations are underway between our two governments for a preferential trade agreement. Collaboration between Nepali and Bangladeshi investors is on the rise. The 2019 double tax avoidance agreement has been instrumental in this regard. To unlock the full potential in trade and investment, we are working to reduce other duties and charges, address non-tariff barriers, simplify procedures, and harmonize regulations. Among the milestones of our economic ties, the power trade stands out as a particularly promising area. With the recent commencement of the export of 40 megawatt of hydroelectricity from Nepal to Bangladesh through the Indian transmission lines, we have entered a new phase of economic partnership. Though small in volume, this is a historic achievement as it brings for the first time the vision of sub-regional power cooperation to life. It is, in fact, in my view, a watershed moment that opens avenues for future energy cooperation in our region. Building on this momentum, our two governments are exploring joint investment opportunities. Talks are already underway for one hydropower project, which is 683 megawatt. The name of the project is Sunkosi Third. Given Nepal's vast hydropower potential and Bangladesh's growing energy needs, such collaboration represents a true win-win, paving the way for a more sustainable, integrated, and prosperous region for all. Third, as a landlocked country, Nepal views connectivity as a natural pathway for cooperation and shared prosperity. Currently, Kathmandu and Dhaka are connected by 13 direct flights per week. Bangladesh has generously offered Nepal access to Mongla and Chittagong seaports, though most of our trade today passes through Kakarvitta, Fulbari, Banglaband corridor. Even so, the Mongla port, especially when paired with Rohanpur-Singhabad railway transit, offers a promising path to greater connectivity. Similarly, negotiations on cargo and passenger vehicle movement are progressing steadily under the BBIN sub-regional framework. A mutually satisfactory outcome will mark an important milestone towards achieving seamless road connectivity across the sub-region. Fourth, civilizational ties and people-to-people links are the beating heart of our friendship. From the journeys of great Bengali Buddhist scholars Atish Dipankar and Banaratna to Nepal centuries ago, to Haraprasad Shastri's discovery of Charzapad, to the shared Sanskrit roots of Nepali and Bangla languages, our history speaks of enduring cultural bonds. These links continue to live on even today. Close to 50,000 Bangladeshi tourists visit Nepal each year, and about 2,700 Nepali students, mostly in the field of medical science, pursue their higher studies in Bangladesh. These students, tourists, and visitors are our true cultural ambassadors. Therefore, we continue to connect our historic, religious, and archaeological sites and consolidate our people-to-people ties with our consolidated efforts. Fifth, we work closely to advance our common interest in regional and international forums. Today, as the two largest contributors of police and troops to UN peacekeeping operations, we play a vital role in global peace and security. In multilateral forums such as the United Nations, Group of 77 and China, and non-aligned movement, we often align our efforts on global development agenda, including LDC priorities and South-South cooperation. As steadfast advocates of SAARC and BIMSTEC, we continue to push for deeper regional integration. Just as our two countries are connected naturally by the rivers that emanate from the Himalayas and flow down to the Bay of Bengal, so too is the destiny of our peoples bound together by mutual dependence. The Himalayas are the pulse of the planet. For whatever happens there echoes across the region and beyond. Today, sadly, this profound connection is increasingly upset by climate crisis. Global warming has endangered lives and livelihoods, both in the mountain regions and far downstream. Cognizant of this reality, our two governments stand together in tackling the climate crisis. I understand there is a session tomorrow at this conference on small state diplomacy. While Nepal and Bangladesh may not neatly fit into this category, the way we engage in regional and multilateral forums remains profoundly consequential. As Toni Morrison, one of my beloved novelists, says, definitions belong to the definers, not to the defined. We must define our own challenges and priorities and continue to transform our vulnerabilities and strengths into the diplomatic influence in regional and multilateral frameworks. Excellencies and dear friends, given the geographical proximity and the history of our close relations, what we have achieved as of now is nowhere close to the potential. As we look to the next 50 years and beyond, there is a need to deepen and diversify our cooperation. Just like two schoolmates of development We are graduating from the least developed country category in 2026. It's a milestone we both have aspired to for long. But graduation will also entail new challenges, particularly with the phase out of international support measures. We must not lose sight of the shared priorities and future directions and work together to ensure a smooth, sustainable, and irreversible graduation. This is more critical as we navigate through the current transitional periods following last year's student-led uprising in Bangladesh and Gen Z-led political changes in Nepal about 2 months ago. We must recognize that both our societies are aspirational, with our young people serving as drivers of change and architects of our future. We must therefore place them at the forefront of our efforts to build a just and prosperous future for all. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, the true measure of any bilateral relationship lies in the benefits it delivers to the people. And closer the people are, the higher the expectations will be. We must therefore focus our conversation on what we should do now and what can be done in future. I'm confident that working together in this spirit will be able to reach even greater milestones in the days ahead. I wish this conference all success, and I wish you all very productive and engaging conference. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your kind remarks. And by this session, we have reached the very last session of day 1 of the Bay of Bengal Conversation 2025. The words safe commerce, safe data, safe borders, and safe bits are now widely used. However, how safe are we? To talk about these issues, I would like to call on the speakers of our next session, which will be the de-risking paradox, how safety became the new vulnerability. I would like to call on stage Mr. Farooq Irnazarov, co-founder and country director, Central Asian Development Institute. Faris Hadrovich, managing director, ESO Quantum Growth Agency. Wu Lin, associate professor, China Foreign Affairs University. Kerry Breen, senior director, Brummer and Partners. Shihab Uddin Kham, advocate, Supreme Court of Bangladesh and fellow, Center for Governance Studies. The session will be moderated by David Morris, CEO, Australia-China Business Council. Please give a big round of applause for our next speakers. Thank you.
Okay, we're all set up. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for holding on until the last session of the day. It's been a wonderful program again, as usual, and congratulations to Zilur Rahman and your team. This Bay of Bengal conversation is such an important platform for these discussions in this part of the world and linking this part of the world with regions across our international system, because there are so many risks and so many opportunities that connect us all. Now, we're going to talk this afternoon about many of these emerging risks, and we have a fabulous panel with expertise from China to Central Asia to Europe and the Western Balkans in particular. We have expertise on technology and expertise on finance and investment into fragile economies. So I guarantee you there's going to be a very interesting discussion to come. Now, we would not have been having this discussion a decade ago. It wasn't so long ago that we were imagining that there were inevitable trends in the globalization system. And indeed, here in Bangladesh a decade ago, there was such optimism as there was throughout much of Asia about globalization, about deepening complex interdependence, that countries such as this one and countries across Asia could help develop and provide opportunities for their people by developing export-oriented industries, embedding themselves in regional and global supply chains, and that the trends of ever-opening markets in the richer economies would provide this history-changing opportunity for countries of the global south to take their place as developed nations. So it was a dream and it was a reality for many hundreds of millions of people across Asia, that we were following a trend of very positive development. And nowhere more than here in Bangladesh, where, if we look back a decade ago, the story here of very successful development and very successful development of export markets for Bangladesh, creating jobs for people in Bangladesh, was really quite astounding. And it means, I hope, that we can learn some lessons from what has gone wrong in recent years, and that we can still salvage the opportunities for developing countries from international trade and investment, technology, and the movement of people. All of those trends that we used to call globalization. But we have had a big change in the last few years, and there's no doubt that it has impacted all of us. The changes towards imagining that there are risks in every supply chain, the change towards imagining that it is normal behaviour for large states, large powerful states, to use economic coercion, to issue sanctions, to put tariffs onto developing countries. This has become normalised. It has become normalised to securitise and weaponise technology supply chains, information, and of course the flows of investment finance are influenced by this enormously. So we are seeing shocks in the international system from these changes in recent years. And so this panel today is going to give us the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into the reasons why we have found ourselves in this situation today, where we are focused on different kinds of risks than the risks we had in front of us a decade ago. A decade ago, when we talked about political risks, we were looking at specific risks in specific countries that were related to their political system, their governance, specific issues around perhaps corruption or issues like that are very common across the international system. Political risks were real and they needed to be managed. Today, when we talk about political risks, we are talking about the risks that bigger countries are going to intervene in our opportunities to trade in the world. We are looking at the risks that our technology supply chains are going to be diverted and influenced because of geopolitical competition amongst the major countries of the world. So I'm going to start by asking Professor Wu from the China Foreign Affairs University to address the question from the perspective of China. And I think China is an interesting place to start because there's no doubt that the emergence of China in the last decade as the world's leading trading economy and as the world's leading manufacturer and therefore the central hub of many of these global supply chains, there's no doubt that the emergence of China into that role has sparked geopolitical competition from the previous dominant economies of the United States and Europe. And so it'll be, I think, very instructive for us to hear from Professor Wu. Now, Professor Wu is able to give us some particular insights because the China Foreign Affairs University in Beijing trains the future diplomats of China. So this is a very important and prestigious institution that is focused on understanding the future trends. So before we come to future trends, though, I want to ask you, Professor Wu, to give us, from your perspective, an understanding of how we got to where we are today from the Chinese perspective. Why are we talking about de-risking in much of the world?
Thank you, David. First of all, I would like to say some words to our hosts. This is the third time I come back to Dhaka to participate in this big event. So very pleasure for me and also in this panel to talk about de-risking. Actually, this topic is also very hot in China. I will share some of the thoughts from the academia because I'm a scholar in China Foreign Affairs University. Thank you for your introduction. Actually, this university is affiliated to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. So actually, we train a lot of scholars and also people who have the international horizons and also to engage with other countries' people. So really honored to be here. And first of all, I would like to elaborate some of the thoughts about how to define and understand de-risking. I think de-risking is not a brand new concept. It is actually a concept in first in financial business, but now it has become some countries' policy and also the strategic narrative, which representing the changing mindset of globalization in Western countries. You know, after the end of the Cold War, globalization witnessed significant development and prosperity. During this period, the world's economic relations experienced rapid integration, openness, and growth, all thanks to open globalization. And the feature of this kind of, I call it old globalization, is openness and also efficiency first, right? So everyone talk about cooperation, integration, and also free trade, right? But now, after 2018, Trump stops a trade war to China, then decoupling policy has put forward, and in 2023, the G7, led by the United States, officially made de-risking the core expression of its economic strategy towards China. Although it avoids using the term decoupling, which sounds softened, milder, and more rational, its essence remains the same: to exclude China in specific key areas such as semiconductors and electric vehicles is effectively decoupling from China. So de-risking signals the end of Western globalization thinking and represent a strategic adjustment and correction to the vulnerabilities brought about by deep globalization. So this is a kind of a new stage of new globalization. But so the West doesn't want to give up globalization, but rather to reconstruct it according to their will, selectively, to continue exploiting the non-West and enjoying the dividends of globalization. So this is my first answer to how to understand de-risking and how it developed to the situation now we face. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Wu. I think it's a very interesting dilemma that China faces, having risen to such a leading role in the international economy in this time of globalization. And so China sees itself as a champion and a beneficiary of globalization at a time when it appears that some of the other leading developed economies do not feel that they're beneficiaries. So it's a very interesting time indeed. Let's travel to Central Asia. Now, in the post-Soviet states of Central Asia, for a long time, the dominant player was Russia, and so the dominant political risk would have been in relation to how these countries negotiate a way forward when so much of the economic and, of course, strategic power was held by their very large neighbour. But interestingly, Central Asia has really embraced global trade and partners from across the international economy, and appears to be finding the countries of Central Asia appear to be finding their own way to manage risks. So to hear how the risk environment has evolved in Central Asia, we're going to hear from Faruk Inazarov, who founded the Central Asian Development Institute, housed in Uzbekistan. Tell us about Central Asia and risk.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here, but before coming here, many people started asking me, why Bangladesh? Where are you going? So not so many people aware of Bangladesh and Uzbekistan. And surprisingly, if you look at the map, so there should be actually short 3-hour flight and I should be in Bangladesh. But somehow I should fly all the way to Dubai, about 3 hours, and then fly for 4 hours to Dhaka. And the time difference is just 1 hour. But somehow, apparently, something is not connecting. And if you look at the State Department's definition, State Department put Central Asia and South Asia in the same basket. It's the department called Central and South Asia Department. So apparently there is a kind of vision that this region should be connected, but somehow it's not. And it's not only about Bangladesh. Afghanistan is nearby to Uzbekistan. So we share the border, but how much people know about Afghanistan in Uzbekistan and wider Central Asia? Unfortunately, not much. And the information is limited, and actually people-to-people contact is limited, and of course it doesn't help. And this brings us to the situation where we see a very interesting dynamic starting from COVID-19, where countries realize that it's better when they are detached from each other, and they can handle the situation better. As we know, they were not successful doing that. And we see like anti-globalization movements, anti-regionalization movements across the world, but mostly for developed countries in the West, they believe that the level of development they achieved is actually enough to safeguard and actually to continue to, rather than expand, rather than like, going forward. For Global South, the situation is drastically different. There is a huge chance actually to leapfrog, to see actually, there is a momentum where you can connect. For Central Asia, it used to be the least integrated region in the world in terms of cross-border trade, the least. And when all countries were globalizing, we're actually drifting away from each other. And now the situation changed drastically. While the world is actually drifting away from each other, we're actually drifting like, together into one piece, and we become like much more regionalized, much more friendlier, better trade prospects, and we even the countries of Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, we're able actually to bring Azerbaijan to the party. So now we have different processes and we have different correlations. So it's quite interesting. Are they connected? I don't know, to some extent maybe. But the idea is the following. So if you want to go through, especially in the global south, you'd better embrace the opportunities and go forward. Because if we look from, let's say, digital development point of view, then apparently the big issue is if you deep into controlling, if you deep into seeing AI as a threat, and if you are deep into domestication of your data, then you are stifling the innovation process. So that's something, there are different paths. So basically you can embrace the more safe way, but then the innovation might be at risk. Or you can go and try something different, drastically different, and see actually whether it works out. Apparently there is no guarantee, but nothing happens unless you try. So that's why what we see in Central Asia in particular, that this process is intensified. Presidents, I think they're meeting almost every second week at different fora. And these connections with presidents, of course, they help accelerate processes. There is something that we're missing in the regions of Central and South Asia. So while we do have connection, very good connection to India, but connection to other South Asian countries is highly missing. And this is something when we talk about safety. So safety is good. So no one is saying that we should be nonchalant and doing some crazy stuff. But at the same time, is this safety with a vision? So once you see that basically you are going to safe harbor and operating by the motto, better be safe than sorry, do you see the vision? Do you see past those hurdles that you eye for? If you are, then maybe you're on the right path. But if you don't, if you are deep into saving and keeping everything what you have, very soon in midterm, you may lose it all. So that's the thought I would like to leave you with.
It's a very interesting set of challenges in Central Asia, and your comment about connectivity I want to take up later as well, and think more about how we seize the opportunities of connectivity and manage its risks. So we'll come back to that. But let's go now to Europe. Now, Europe, of course, when we think of Europe, we and the rest of the world generally think about the European Union these days and this giant experiment for countries to reduce barriers to each other and to build a deeper and deeper interdependence amongst themselves. We can learn very much, I think, though, from hearing from some of the countries that are on the periphery, that may well be potentially on the road to EU membership, but that will also face all kinds of challenges in progressing along that road. So to hear about the challenges in some of those smaller states that have been through their own significant turmoil in the past and are trying to find a way through. Let's hear from Faris Hadrovic, who's the Managing Director of Quantum Growth in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Yes, certainly. I think we've, as a region, have been in perpetual risk management for the last 30 years. But before I answer your question, I'd just like to take a few words and express my appreciation and congratulations to Zilur, who has, since 2022, has created, through all the challenges that he has done, has faced, has created a conference which I think is the largest of its kind in Bangladesh and the wider region. Through all the political turmoil, the changes, the death threats that he's had, I think it's a great testament to his resilience, and we all, I think, need to recognize that. And the reason I'm here also, again, is to support that and to support Zilur's and Bangladesh's vision of a prosperous future. Now, going back to your question, we can frame perhaps de-risking as not stability. And de-risking often reduces the exposure, but also reduces the options that countries have. Countries may feel safer in the short term, but they may become less resilient in the long term. So de-risking can protect you perhaps from shocks, but it can also protect you from opportunities. And I think that is primarily the case with smaller countries and regions which often find themselves at the periphery, which is the case also perhaps with the Western Balkans as a periphery of the European Union and aspiring member states of the European Union. So I think you rightly pointed out in the beginning that we've seen a huge change in the last decade, perhaps in the last 5 years more so, perhaps in the prior to 2020, we could have said that the cheapest supplier wins. Post 2020, things have changed significantly, and we can now say that the most trusted and compliant and politically aligned partner wins. And in that respect, trust has become a currency and anxiety has become a policy driver. And the paradox of the situation is that de-risking can quietly turn into re-risking, so to speak. The Western Balkans in particular, as I said, has lived in a state of perpetual risk management for a number of reasons, and primarily stemming from the wars in former Yugoslavia in the 1990s, and the political instability that has plagued the region, including corruption and different diverging paths of the countries. So we have political risk, we have market fragmentation, we have EU accession as a driver. And most recently, we have an influx of foreign influence, in particular China, the Gulf states, most specifically the UAE, Turkey as well, and other Gulf states, and of course the EU as the primary country that foots the bill in a way. So we had to build resilience before it became a global trend. And I think going back specifically into Bosnia and Herzegovina is a pure example of the paradox. It's politically fragmented, yet economically dependent on external markets. It's a very small country. Just to put it into perspective, it's a country of about now 3.5 million people. It has over 150 ministers on various levels. We have 3 parliaments and can seem to agree on the most basic of issues when it comes to, for example, the foreign policy and EU accession. So EU accession acts as both a stabilizer and a limiter. So you have high compliance expectations, but access to the benefits are very limited, unfortunately. So I think in brief, you can say that Bosnia and Herzegovina is not choosing partners, it's choosing between the consequences, rather.
Well, thank you, Faris. And it's fascinating to hear about 150 ministers in Bosnia-Herzegovina at different levels. That's a challenge in itself, let alone all of the others. You rightly pointed out that a few years ago in supply chains, the key competitive strength was cost. And this was a great opportunity for developing countries to be competitive in global supply chains. If they could compete on cost, they could find their piece of the action. And you rightly said that this is one of the key changes that has occurred in recent years, that pressure is being applied to not make supply chain decisions based on cost, but rather to make them based on political allegiance or trust and safety. Imagine safety. Now, this is nowhere more apparent than in the field that is changing everything for all of us, and that is the field of technology. Technology is evolving so rapidly that really nowhere, even the EU, which believes that it can regulate technology, even the EU is unable to keep up with the pace of change, let alone the rest of us. But in the world of technology, what is happening is, even though there might be a deep disillusionment with globalization in some of the parts of the world that we've talked about, actually technology is globalizing us more than ever. We're becoming more and more interconnected, whether we like it or not. Our data, information about our lives, we are sharing minute by minute with not only trusted friends on Facebook or WeChat if it's China, but actually we are sharing our data with governments and with businesses and with all kinds of other organizations that we certainly probably do not trust at all. So there are significant issues here around how do we manage risks of technology and technological connectivity at a time when we are being told that it is simply a matter of purchasing your technology from a trusted partner. Well, as we know, technological risks come from everywhere. All of the major states, all of the major state actors in the world engage, for example, in espionage. So the risks don't just come from one country, they come from everywhere. Most of the big countries as well engage in more serious cyber attacks than just espionage. So again, these risks don't come from one or two countries alone, but actually from all of the major players in the technological world. And of course, risks to us as citizens, as individuals, or as societies can also come from terrorist organizations, from corporations that have the wrong objectives, that their objectives are not serving the people, but serving their own profits. Or indeed, risks of technology can come to us even from teenagers in their bedrooms who are able to utilize technology to create new risks. So the narrative that it's simply a matter of trusted friends seems to be a rather self-serving one from the major technological players. Now, Shihab Uddin Khan, who's a barrister here in Bangladesh, has deeply researched and thought about these questions, about how to build safeguards with these new evolving technologies. How do we manage AI, for example? And so I want to ask you, first of all, we'll come back to the future, but first of all, I want to ask you about how have we got to this point, and what does that risk environment look like in the technological world?
Yep. Thank you, David. You hear me all? Can you hear me? A very good afternoon. After a very wonderful inauguration, and of course, after having delicious lunch and whole day event, you must be tired. Okay, let me talk on some popular and some important issues, that is artificial intelligence. Before that, I must take the opportunity to give a big thank you to CGS, and especially President of CGS, Mr. Zilur Rahman, for arranging such a wonderful event, as well as for inviting me as a speaker. Okay, you know, in recent years, there is a huge hype on AI that is called artificial intelligence. I believe everyone present in this hall room, somehow or other, you are affected by AI. You either suffered or either receive benefit from AI. So in recent years, artificial intelligence dominates our personal, social, family, even political life. So let me give a very plain meaning of artificial intelligence. Let me convey with a very plain understanding what is AI. You know, we use several devices. We use computer. Is AI, it cannot grow or generate automatically. It takes information from the computer or devices, or from your personal, social, family data, or political data, or business data. It takes information from data. The more data AI have, so more functional it is. In other way, it works like an agent. It likes an agent. It basically monitors your activity, your data, your informations. It basically judges your informations, your data, and then it decides. Then it takes decisions. That is the problem. So in our usual life, we often say that the science and technology gives us passion in our life, but it takes away emotions. And other way, you know, with the development of science and technology, we are in a moment we are facing in a world where we are relying on technologies, devices, more than our own brains. So that is the scope AI taking, you see. And there are other discussions that there are mistrust between humans in our day-to-day life. So that is the area AI working on. There is a popular term called paradox of trust. While we discuss on AI, the term paradox of trust comes. Because in everyday life, as we are involved in technologies, we are habituated with technological devices. We must need to use internet, we must need to use computer, mobile phone, and other technological devices. So you, very often in your everyday life, even perhaps not surprisingly in every moment, you are giving your information. You have to. You know, in taking any services, if you take even to shopping malls, you are giving your informations. So AI basically generates these informations. And it generates in its own way. And when someone manipulates, or the system manipulates by someone for otherwise purposes, then AI start working negative. You know, as David asked for the safeguard, as we have got, I think I have just 5 minutes to conclude. Okay, we need basically a holistic approach, holistic combinations of legal, institutional, ethical, and technological, digital frameworks. I guess I'll take second slot. I'll take another slot to talk. But right now, I will emphasize on the international safeguards what we have right now. As I said, we need holistic approach. I will focus on 3 aspects that the internationally, the various sects of society, the tech medias, and the giant techs, they are taking, or the concerned authorities, they are for looking after the issues, what they're doing. You know, for taking safeguard or for ensuring yourself, your life, your family, your business, your politics from misuse of AI, you know, I'd refer one law recently passed by European Union that is called AI Act 2024. They basically classifies the artificial intelligence into several categories in different levels. Those are called unacceptable levels, high levels, limited levels, and minimum levels. And this law imposes strict rules on deepfakes, and it imposes mandatory disclosures that AI contents must be disclosed, or disclosure should be given. And this law also requires companies and other institutes to implement content provenance, watermarking, and synthetic media labels. And of course, finally, if something happened some losses took place, occurred, then strong enforcement with heavy penalties are recommended. Next, I'll move on to UNESCO. Recently in 2021, they gave a recommendation on the ethics of AI. UNESCO, they can't enact laws, they can pass any law, but they can convey recommendations on ethics of AI. They basically focuses on the transparency, accountability, and on human rights issues, as well as they urge the states and regulatory mechanisms, authorities, to create safeguards using various detection technologies and authenticity, content authenticity infrastructures. And after EU and UNESCO, there are organizations, international organizations like Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and moreover, Global Partnership on AI, that is GPAI, popularly known. They also advocate for robust security measures for bringing transparency and user awareness mechanisms. And they also focuses on traceability in using devices, computers, and the system of outputs and inputs that is important for tracking fake news origins. And Global Partnership AI, they also have enormous research collaborations on detecting deepfakes and strengthening digital integrity. I think I will talk on the domestic, what's going on in Bangladesh in my next slot. But I'll finish my speech now on focusing on these, that we are in an era where we every day are suffering from fake news, deepfakes, data manipulation, and misinformations. So I'll give further inputs in my next, if I get a second chance.
Thank you very much. And indeed, it's a fascinating area, isn't it? There's so much to probe here. I think even the science fiction novels that I read as a young child never imagined a world of deep fakes and fake news and all of these challenges that we are facing today and that young people are going to be facing more and more in the future. We'll come back to technology. Finance and money at the end of the day is what makes development happen. So attracting investment into infrastructure, into business projects that will create economic activity is actually what makes development happen. And so in this new risk environment, it's very important for us to understand the drivers of these changes towards the risks that are emerging, the risks that supply chains will be diverted, not based on cost, but based on other geopolitical factors. And Kerry Breen of Brahma and Partners has lived here in Bangladesh for, I think, more than a decade, and has been working to bring private equity investment into Bangladesh. And so we're going to hear from you finally, but last but certainly not least, because of the importance of finance, tell us about the trends that have brought us to this point where we are seeing all of these new risks to investors.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everybody. Like the others, I would just like to thank CGS for inviting me to speak on this panel. It's such a fascinating topic. And also being from a private sector financial institution, it's kind of very interesting to be surrounded by geopolitical experts and to have that cross-pollination of ideas, which I think we could benefit from more regularly. It'd be great to do that on a more regular basis. In the start of the session today, you mentioned in your remarks trade, corporate FDI, and investment flows, and sometimes we lump all those together, although they do have different decision makers and they do have different drivers. but they are all parts of globalization and the trends that we've been dealing with. So I just wanted to focus a little bit in specifically on the finance aspect of that. Where does de-risking fit into that in particular, and what does that mean for some emerging markets and for frontier markets like Bangladesh? As David said, that's the area I've been involved in for the last more than 10 years now, bringing private equity capital to frontier markets and deploying it there. The first thing is, interestingly, what I might call financial FDI, by which I mean capital that's given from institutional investors such as insurance companies or pension funds, high net worth individuals, universities, et cetera, to fund managers to deploy overseas. That financial FDI has been reshaping very much in the way that corporate supply chains have been, in that in recent years it has been retrenching somewhat to developed markets. Capital has been flowing in that direction, and it's become much more selective amongst emerging markets. But some of the main drivers of that change are different. And interestingly, we don't really use the term de-risking in our sector, right? We look at the risk-reward trade-off. So just a different way of talking about it, even though it's the same issue. When some of the other panelists have talked about, if you're too conservative, you lose the upside. So similar concepts, but we look at it very much in tandem. And one of the main drivers of any kind of money operation anywhere is interest rates, right? And so when you want to understand investment flows, first and foremost, you look at the interest rate environments around the world. And in 2010, when global trade was really hitting the enthusiasm for globalization, there were very low interest rates in developed markets. So in a way, this institutional capital jumped on the bandwagon of let's go where the growth is, because we can get great returns in these markets. And so that became very much a part of the globalization story. And that low interest rate environment in developed markets stayed until about 22, 23. And when that changed, you did see a change in the deployment of funds abroad from these institutional investors and the funds that are linked to them. So we saw the reversion of some funds there. You could see it most dramatically in venture capital investing, where valuations dropped, activity dropped. And you could see it in a slowdown in the raising of additional capital for private equity funds, although there's still massive amounts of money under management by private equity funds, most of which is still unused. So that was one big change, when the interest rate environment changed and investors recalibrated because of that. If they can make a better return in a very safe market, then the capital will seek that return. And then secondly, I think what happened around that time is people took stock of their experience in that period in investing in emerging markets. And it wasn't that they entered without doing due diligence or properly understanding the opportunities, but I think that, and even my own fund, by the way, was a part of that wave. So the initial foray into Bangladesh came around 2012, although I came a little bit later. There were a lot of lessons learned over that time period. And what we learned was high growth does not necessarily, in all cases, mean high return. What we found ourselves in our experience in Bangladesh is growth is the easiest part of the equation. Everything else is very difficult, right? And I think that was the truth in some emerging markets and some funds in various emerging markets. So there is also that recalibration taking place now. Is the return what we thought? Maybe it's harder than we thought. Maybe there's more frictions in regulation and compliance regulation and many, many different things that detracts from our ability to really realize the return that we thought was going on in emerging markets. And now we're seeing capital start to distinguish between emerging markets, so that the ones that are more have stronger macroeconomic fundamentals, the ones that have stronger macroeconomic oversight, greater political stability, less FX risk, they offer that better reward and risk combination, and the capital's going there. So the Mexicos, the Indonesias, the Indias actually are doing better than some of the other emerging markets, and certainly frontier markets such as Bangladesh or Nigeria. We were never very much on the radar of these institutional investors, to be honest. It was more DFI investments in these markets, but the timeline that they could expect this wave of capital to reach them has now receded a little bit. And I think now, on top of that fundamental economic analysis, they're overlaying this geopolitical tensions, and they're understanding that this is a world of greater conflict, and so that adds to the risk profile. So that's one of maybe 3 different vectors that's really affecting this flow of investment capital to markets around the world. And I'll just give one example that kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. So there was a group of very large Canadian pension funds, Canada Pensions, and they had set an objective in 2019 to deploy 30% of their assets under management in emerging markets. And by 22-23, they had reached 22% of their assets being deployed in emerging markets. And they then announced that they were going to recalibrate, and their target was now 20%. So slight retrenching on emerging markets, and they said it was lower return relative to risk and geopolitical tensions. So that combination did translate very specifically in that case to not necessarily a big retrenchment, but not continuing to put money into these markets. And the last trend I want to talk about before I just talk about some of the conclusions is what we also see in our industry in emerging markets and frontier markets is the institutional investors, it's like a flight to quality. They want the safe pair of hands in a market. So they're not investing in first-time fund managers, and they are investing in the larger fund managers, the fund managers who have done Fund 1 or Fund 2 and are going on to a bigger and larger Fund 3 and have proven that they know how to navigate the risk in that market. So that's another sign of where they're kind of factoring in risk in their decision-making. So all of this has a couple implications if you're an emerging market that's not one of the leading emerging markets, or if you're a frontier market like Bangladesh is. It's gotten harder. It's gotten harder to get this investment capital. And if you were looking for your first-time managers to start a private equity fund here, that's going to be less feasible. And if you have funds in your market already, the implication of them getting larger in size is they probably want to write bigger checks, which means they want to invest 20 million or 30 million per business instead of 10 million or 15 million. And so your companies that were maybe going to access, your mid-cap companies that were maybe going to access investment capital might not have access to that capital anymore. So those are just important considerations for people to think about when they're coming up with their strategies in terms of how they might want to attract and what benefit there could be for their economies in terms of expectations related to investor capital flows.
Well, thank you very much, Kerry. That's a very sobering explanation of the decision-making behind these investment flows that are so important to developing countries. One of the big trends of a decade or so ago was the flow of investment into the Chinese markets, the attraction of American and European and Japanese and other capital into China to invest in manufacturing, to then export to the rest of the world. And this is one of the big changes that has occurred, this slowing of that foreign investment coming into China, and China's emergence itself as an investor into other markets. China, which traditionally had gone to very safe resource-based markets, like Australia was the #1 destination for Chinese investment for many years. China is now diversifying away from Western investment destinations to the global south. So there's a strategy underneath this I want to ask you about, Wu Lin. How do you think China is seeing its interests in relation to these new risks, and what is the strategy here? How will China manage the risks that it faces in the new geopolitical contest?
Thank you, David. Actually, I know in South Asian countries, Bangladesh has become the #1 Chinese FDI destination. Yeah, so this explains, when the West want to block China and to decrease the reliance, the interdependence with the Chinese, like manufacturing and also trade goods, right? So I think China has diversified its trade relations. The #1 destination is its neighboring countries, especially Southeast Asia and South Asia. So we can see China and ASEAN, Southeast Asian Nations Association. This kind of has 10 nations in Southeast Asia. So this year, China and the ASEAN FTA has lifted to 3.0, and in the past, it's more focusing on the goods and service, and also the free trade between the regional countries. But now the 3.0, it focuses on the high technology supply chain, and also electrical vehicles, and also digital economy, green energy, this kind of new technology, new production industries. So, and also China and the South Asian countries also has boosted. So I think this is the #1 approach for China to defend this kind of challenges by de-risk. The second one, I think, is by strengthen its own economic resilience in the domestic market. So if you know, China's just released its fifth five-year plan. So this is 2026 to 2030. It's a 5-year plan. Actually, the essence of this plan is about high-quality growth. So mainly focusing on the domestic market to improve the domestic, the consumers. They should spend money, okay, right? So, and also to spend money to other countries, which means FDI, right? So I think these two things, and also technology innovation. You know, I have a statistic. You know, the U.S. has exposed cheap export control to China, but this haven't worked. You know, it's inadvertently accelerate China's independent R&D. Data from the China Semiconductor Industry Association shows the localization rate of China's semiconductor equipment increased from 20% in 2020 to 35% in 2023. So I think this has some good outcomes for China to accelerate its technology innovation. Yeah.
Well, thank you. This is going to be an area for all of us to watch, I think, in future. And moving west from China, in Central Asia, Farouk, I want to come back to you. Central Asia, of course, traditionally being landlocked and dependent very much on Russia. Does this greater internationalization of China, the evolution of new trade routes across Central Asia linking China with Europe, what does this mean for Central Asia? What are the opportunities and what are the risks?
Thank you for this question, David. Indeed, Central Asia is a landlocked region, and Uzbekistan is one of the 2 countries in the world that is double landlocked. So guess what is the second country? Anyone? Yeah, I knew it. So it's a nice quiz question. It's Liechtenstein. So Liechtenstein is the second country that is double landlocked. For those of you who don't understand what is like landlocked status, especially if you live closer to the world ocean, landlocked country is actually you have to cross one country in order to get access to the sea. So for Uzbekistan, we have to cross 2 countries in order to get to access to the sea. So meaning that all type of maritime trade and everything is actually quite a luxury for us. So that's why we have to go a different way. And previously, as you righteously mentioned, all the way it was like through the logistics and everything went, 80% of our trade went to Russia or through Russia. And now with sanctions situation changed, so southern route is available, but it's unfortunately underdeveloped in terms of infrastructure and security reasons. I'm talking about route through Afghanistan, Pakistan, and down the road. So the only option for us is actually to go through Trans-Caspian, what we call middle corridor. And unfortunately, it's too pricey. So currently, it's only 5% of trade and logistics go through middle corridor. And it gives you, like, an understanding that basically there are so many countries they have to deal with, and in order to reap the benefits of the international trade. In that regard, China is there. We see a growing presence of Chinese companies and Chinese investors in almost all sectors of the economy, but most notably in strategic sectors like natural gas, gold, oil industry. So we see a lot of Chinese companies. But at the same time, we see also the vector of Central Asian governments to diversify, so not to be dependent on one country. So be it Russia, be it China, be it US or European Union. So it's more like, let's see, I think Bill Clinton said back in '96, no one has so many friends as Central Asia does, right? Because we actually do try to get along with everyone and bring them together. But the risking situation puts you in the situation where you have to pick a side. So it's not like, you sit there and just wait and you are friendly with everyone, because even if you are friendly with everyone, so other big powers may be offended. This time of the year, so they're particularly vulnerable to these kind of things. So that's why you have to accommodate their interests and needs. And for Central Asia, the answer is, I think, straightforward. To convert from being landlocked to land-linked, we have to go digital. So Central Asian population is young, so about 60% of Uzbek population is youth. And so the demand for digital training is extremely high. And the government realizes that, even though the government, more senior people, they have little awareness of actually how things work, but they just realize it's a kind of cool thing to go into digital and to use the digital driver as some export commodity. To provide with data, information, services, and of course, like, there was an ancient Silk Road starting from China, going through Central Asia and all the way to Europe. So now I think it's the time to talk about digital Silk Road, to connect it and to see actually to use the development of China. So in that sense, we see actually a very interesting paradox. On the one hand, we see huge demand for Western technologies. But judging from the price, we just say that, okay, the low-hanging fruit is actually Chinese technologies. So that's why it's, and inevitably it becomes kind of natural choice. But it's more like being able to capitalize it, being able to connect it, and use it to your own advantage. So that's the thought I would like to leave you with.
So trying to be friends with everyone is complicated. This is the challenge.
Extremely complicated. It's psychologists, I don't know whether psychologists are here, they describe this as a likability syndrome. So if you are like, you want to please each and everyone, in the end you're going to lose and sit with depression. So basically, sometimes you really have to pick sides, sometimes you really have to prioritize, and sometimes you actually have to be able to offend someone for the long-term benefit, to improve the relationship exactly with the same person who you offended.
There are going to be very interesting lessons for us all to learn from how countries that are stuck in this position navigate the uncertainties ahead. I've just come from a conference in Malaysia where Southeast Asians from all over the ASEAN region were discussing this very question of how do we continue to be friends with everyone? How do we not get forced by a major power how do we not be coerced by a major power into only locking in our supply chains in one favoured direction? How do we work with all? And that's certainly the philosophical and practical commitment that countries in Southeast Asia are making, and that's going to be another interesting region of the world to watch, I think, because they will trenchantly resist being pulled in one direction by one hegemonic player, and they will want to maintain friendships and economic integration with all. So whether they can succeed is going to be a very interesting thing to watch. Now, Faris, I want to come back to Europe, and in particular the periphery of Europe, because clearly the European Union is a very large market in itself, and clearly the European Union has determined in recent years to chart a more geopolitical role for itself, and perhaps this has partly been in response to geopolitical circumstances, but also we've heard from the Commission the muscling up, the wanting to be more of a geopolitical player. So we can imagine that the European Union is going to be setting pretty clear directions for those aspiring states on the periphery to cooperate and to operate in a more geopolitical way. How does a country like Bosnia-Herzegovina navigate that challenge? Can you, like Uzbekistan, try and be friends to all? Can you benefit from your economic integration with Asian economies, with Middle Eastern economies, with Europe and with the United States and others? Or are you going to find that you really have to lock yourself into seeing the world through the European Commission's term of de-risking? After all, it's really the European Union that added the geopolitical dimension to that term, de-risking, and it is very clearly about decoupling from Chinese supply chains in particular. Is this a pressure that Bosnia is facing, and how do you see your country and the other countries of the Western Balkans navigating this in future?
Thank you for that question. I think you made a very interesting observation just before that with regards to Southeast Asia, and also related to Central Asia, and how they're trying to be friends with everybody and not to antagonize anybody. But I think the idea, and I think applies very much to Southeast Europe as well, and particularly the Western Balkans. Because I think in the context of de-risking, and you rightly pointed out the EU as the main foreign policy driver of change in the region, it's not about being neutral or being on the sidelines, because that's more of a passive role. I think what Southeast Europe, but also I think you've mentioned Southeast Asia, they can play a much more active role, being a bridging ecosystem. And I think that's where the advantage lies in these, well, at least in the Southeast Europe, which is a very small, very fragmented region, but a very rich region as well. It has very good cultural and historical ties both between the East and the West. It's economically tied to the European Union. It regularly hosts Chinese, Turkish, Gulf, EU, US delegations, conferences, and I think it can play a very important role in that respect. We've seen a few attempts across the region, and I mean the wider Western Balkans region, not only the countries that are aspiring to be EU member states, but also some that are already EU member states, like Slovenia and Croatia. Slovenia in particular has tried to play a role in terms of the Ukrainian and Russian conflict, even though it's a very small country, and in other aspects as well. It's politically fragmented, but economically and strategically very, I think, important location. And I think one major advantage is with regards to the EU, it's still not bound fully by the EU's rigid system, so it's still flexible. And I think therein lies the advantage of the Western Balkans in particular, in trying to be a bridge between these different playing actors. But definitely the EU is the main foreign policy objective of all the countries. They're on different paths for different reasons, and they're inextricably connected to one another, both politically, culturally. So, and there's of course a lot of influence and meddling in each other's affairs. But I think beyond that and beyond petty politics, in personal interest and corruption. There's no other option but further integration within the EU system. And I think in the meantime, while they're still negotiating and playing on that, I think they can play this bridging role and get the best out of all worlds.
There are going to be lessons for all of us in this. It'll be very interesting to watch. Thank you. Now, Shihab,
yes.
We know that you have more to tell us about technological risks. I'm in
David.
particular keen to hear from you about how you see the future. How are we going to navigate these risks, and what kind of safeguards can we put in place around the risks of technology?
Yes, thank you, David. I understand we have run out of time, and I was one of the contributors. Okay, let me start with what safeguards till now taken in Bangladesh. Let me give a very short brief. You know, in Bangladesh, it's just still now it's working on build effective safeguarding framework, and we have cyber protection ordinance. It just passed in this year, 2025. Previously, it was Cyber Security Act. And before then, it was Digital Security Act. And unfortunately, you know, these laws were enacted for protecting people from, you know, cyber offenses, AI misuses. But unfortunately, these laws became draconian, and these laws mostly used against the political opponents to suppress the political opponents. You know, the interim government, right now, they amended the law, the previous one, and they proposed an ordinance, and which was gazetted this year, that is Cyber Security Ordinance. Hopefully, it will work in future for good purposes. You know, in this year also, this interim government, they passed another 2 ordinances. One is Personal Data Protection Ordinance, 2025, which was very much needed. As you know, AI, it generates personal data, informations, and that somehow, with the help of other third parties or for other manipulations that basically used for some other purposes, and people get affected. And the government also proposed and gazetted another ordinance, that is National Data Governance Ordinance 2025. So it gives a holistic approach to gather all the problems and solutions, including personal and in group level or in business and other purposes. Also, the government in the last year, they proposed a policy that is called National Artificial Intelligence Policy, and it basically designed, to me, as I went through that policy, it's basically designed following the European Union Artificial Intelligence AI Act 2024. And it actually tries to develop the AI risks classification system and the frameworks, as well as it gave guidelines for safe deployment in media, elections, and public communications, and also for tort and other civil liabilities as arose from those activities. You know, I'll not take more time. I'll finish my speech with focusing on the ethical and institutional safeguards. That is very important. As you know, legal and institutional safeguards, that depends on the initiatives of the government. But, you know, if the tech companies, the big tech companies, they form independent AI ethics board in their companies, that will help to develop, AI misuses, as well as if the companies and other institutes, they conduct third-party audits, so that would help on algorithm fairness. And another 2 would be, the institutes like CGS and other worldwide, they can publish transparency reports on AI uses, cyber offenses, or other digital offenses or uses or misuses. And finally, in a country like Bangladesh, media literacy programs is very much needed. For citizens to identify which one is fake news, which one is deep fake, which is misinformation, which is disinformations. Thank you everyone.
Thank you. Now, finally, Kerry, I want to come back to you. You're advising investors not just on their short-term return on investment, but you're looking to the medium and long term as well. So when you are advising investors on the risks, the risk environment that they face, how do you identify those risks and how do you propose they manage the new risks to investment in fragile and complex developing economies?
Sure. So I think in case I was too sobering the first response, I can be a little bit more upbeat. I think there's so much that can be done, and there's a tremendous growth opportunity on advantage in emerging markets. But there are some things that need to be done to address the risks that the investors have in mind, and I think that for a frontier market, my advice would be more for them than for the investor, who can understand the risks but would like to see certain action taken. For a frontier market, I think there's some no-regrets moves that you can take, and by that I mean there are some things you can do which are going to be good for your economy, whether or not these investors come. And number one would be reforming certain regulation, particularly related to capital markets. That usually can be improved to help the efficiency and attractiveness of that capital market. Various other points may be related to inflows and outflows of capital. We have a policy paper on what we think makes sense for Bangladesh. I'm sure there's lots of me's with lots of policy papers in other markets that have advice on regulatory change that could really help be enabling for investors to enter. And I think secondly is working on corporate governance. This is really something that's very important for enabling capital flows from institutional investors. Just simply having one set of accounts, having better levels of compliance, really understanding and respecting the role of an external investor, whether or not it's your local investor or a foreign investor, and strengthening that awareness understanding is huge for frontier markets. So those are two things that I think can be done along the way. And then I think there's actually some low-hanging fruit for frontier markets, which is look to mobilize your local capital in a smart way. And I don't know if the ambassador from Nepal is perhaps still around, but Nepal has actually done this very well. So they have a fund industry despite having a very small market size. It's local funds that are working on a scale that's appropriate to the economic opportunities in that market. And they're proving that cycle, that you can invest, grow a business, exit from the business, return capital, and doing it all over again. So there's no reason why we couldn't do that here or in other markets. And then lastly, go where the energy is. We were talking about how China is an investor in Bangladesh now, for example. I think another interesting transaction that happened recently is the announcement by Alphamart of Indonesia. So another emerging market, but a regional emerging market. Alphamart is going to enter Bangladesh. They just announced this last month in partnership with a large local agricultural entity, and they want to open 1,000 convenience stores across Dhaka, so really expand organized retail in Bangladesh. So, the big picture is complicated, but look for the opportunities that you have to really play to your strengths and bring those investors in. Those investors are out there, and it's the issue of finding the match of the appetite, and the risk perception is very different. An investor sitting in Canada has a totally different risk perception of Bangladesh than someone sitting in Indonesia. So accept the situation that we have and really work to leverage what's going in your favor in the current trends.
Well, thanks so much, Kerry, and what a great note to end the panel discussion on, that there are so many opportunities there. Now, we have run a little bit over time, but I think that's because the whole program was running a little bit over time, and so I don't want to cut off the opportunity for questions. We have 5 minutes until we really must close for tea break, but if we can fit into that 5 minutes, perhaps 2 questions. I can see we have a gentleman coming to the microphone, and perhaps one other if you wish to be ready. Please keep your question brief, and if you want to address it to a particular panelist, let us know. Thank you. Over to you. We're just waiting on a microphone there.
Greetings all of you. Myself, Ong Thogyo Marma Ong. I'm a student of law, University of Dhaka. My question is to Ulin ma'am. It is related to actually geopolitics and geoeconomics. We know that in present geopolitics and geoeconomy, USA consider China as a threat to its monopoly in economy and geopolitics. As a result, USA commenced a new political strategy, which is known as Indo-Pacific strategy, which is actually prevent China from the competition with USA. For enforcing this strategy, USA led some regional organization has formed. For example, we can say AUKUS and Quad. So my question is to Wulin ma'am, what is the response or encounter against the Indo-Pacific strategy of USA? And my additional question is, Western media blame Chinese authority that they are oppressing Uyghur people in Xinjiang province, and for oppressing they are formed some concentration camp. As a citizen of China, what is your response? Thank you, ma'am.
So both questions for me, okay?
Please, yeah.
Okay, maybe I will first respond to your Indo-Pacific strategy, right? Actually, this is more geopolitical issue, right? And it has actually caused a lot of challenges to Chinese geopolitical environment since Trump 1.0, let's see, 2017 till now, yeah. So you see there are Quad and AUKUS, right? And several minilateral blocks. And also IPEF, this is another economic bloc initiated by Trump, the first term. So I think China's response policy is consistent because China upholds open regionalism. So so that's why I just mentioned China-ASEAN FTA 3.0. It wants to consistently cooperate with its regional economies to promote and to co-development. So this is what China's response. It don't want to, how to say, to compete with the United States, especially in geopolitics. It wants to, because the advantage of China is economic, right, power. So it wants to have close economic relations with its neighboring countries and to promote integration and regionalization. And also, I think this can, I can use trade-off.
The risk-return trade-off, yes.
Yeah. The challenges of the Indo-Pacific strategy. Sorry for, what's the next question?
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much.
That allows us to take the last 2 minutes for one final question, if there's anyone else who wants to ask a second question. If not, I want to thank so much this fabulous panel. Hasn't it been an interesting discussion? Thank you very much. And I think we need now to get a group photograph, and then everybody can relax, enjoy some coffee or tea, and we will see you at dinner. Thank you.
Take these off, or?
Thank you to the esteemed panelists for an insightful discussion. Please come forward to the stage for a group photo. Everyone who are invited for tomorrow's parallel session, we will see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And like today, our plenary session will start from 11 a.m. Hopefully, we all be together. And tea and coffee is served at the Oasis. Hopefully, all of you enjoyed the day one of Bay of Bengal Conversation 2025. Thank you.